Good evening. My name is Jennifer New, and I am the Associate Director of the Obermann Center at the University of Iowa. Welcome to our final Obermann conversation of this academic year. These are a series that we put on to put scholars and artists from the university into conversation with people from the community around joint areas of interest, expertise, and passion. Before we dive into tonight's talk, I just wanted to thank Jason Polios with the Iowa City Public Library for being here tonight to DJ, but also for partnering, and the whole library for partnering with us all year. They jumped in and moved everything to Zoom, and we're so thankful. So tonight we are talking about neighborhood nests, which NESTS is an acronym for Nurturing Every Student Together Safely. And we're joined by three guests, and somebody else is going to come on a little later in the conversation as well when we get to a section that pertains to her. But our first two guests I'll introduce are Megan Alter, who is a senior manager, ELA and content solutions and services at ACT. And she is one of the co-founders of NESTS. She's an active South District resident and a parent with a second grader and a seventh grader in the school district. And she received her PhD from the University of Iowa in 2004. And another one of the co-founders of NESTS is Missie Forbes. Missie is the executive director of 4Cs of Johnson County. She is also a University of Iowa alumnus and was born and raised in Iowa City and has years of experience in nonprofit work. And then we're joined by Peggy Schwab. And Peggy, I've had the great fortune to get to know this year. She is a second-year master's candidate in the University of Iowa's College of Education School of Counseling program and Iowa LEND, which one thing I've been learning working with this group is there are many, many, many acronyms. So I'm going to ask all of us to check our acronyms as we go. But LEND is Leadership, Education, and Neurodevelopmental Disorders and Related Disabilities. And this year, the Obermann Center funded Peggy as an Obermann-Spelman Rockefeller Community Scholar to serve as a program manager for NESTS. So NESTS began as an idea, and I'm going to let Megan and Missie really jump in and tell you more, but it was a response that came about, I believe, starting last summer, as we were all realizing that the great confusion that had occurred last spring as the district moved to online learning was that we were going to be in a similar predicament going into the fall of students having to do at least some, if not all, of their learning in this distant format. And so a group from different parts of the community, business, nonprofits, I believe the faith sector and the school district started thinking together about how could we support students. So Missie and Megan, could you kind of tag team and tell us about how this idea came about, some of the groups involved, and then also what was the initial intention of NESTS?
I'll start. I was in a meeting and we were talking about online school that was like evident that was going to happen. And somebody said, and here the academic gap widens. There are already kids that are like sick of video games now. And, so online learning just was a frightening thing to think about. And so I had been on social media and everybody in the community, it seemed, was like, what can we do to support students and things like that? And so I contacted Megan and I was like, I feel like between the two of us, we could really rally some people and figure out what to do to support at-risk students. And I don't even know if it was that fine-tuned actually, but just who can we grab to just start a conversation? And so we kind of brainstormed some people that were in that initial meeting that we should bring to the table and things like that. And our group kind of shored up from that. And then we collectively thought that it would be more of a grassroots effort to begin. You know, there's a lot of bureaucracy that goes along when you label it a school district or another governmental entity or whatever. And so we thought a grassroots movement was really the way to go. And so there were several nonprofits that were a part of the initial conversation. And as we kind of, as our ideas kind of took shape, we came up with the micro hub of learning, which was then what we thought would be a good small neighborhood pods of learning that would stick together, that, you know, someone would be able to monitor and help with the academic portion of it. And I'll lob it over to Megan, over to Megan.
Sure. Well, I mean, Missy covered so many of all of these moving parts really concisely, but I just want to add a couple of things that actually, it really was Missy, and I think coming out of those conversations that she had with other nonprofits, that it became really quickly actually about microhubs for at-risk students. At that time, there was a lot of newspaper op-eds and discussions about, you know, microhubs and what that might look for learning, but it was also brought up that that's going to also have a lot of risk for at-risk students. And so Missy kind of put those pieces together to say, what about microhubs in the neighborhoods, so that we don't have to worry about, you know, transportation barriers and whatnot, and that students will feel safe, but do it for the kids who need it most. And I mean, that was what I remember. Actually, I'm sitting on my porch and Missy had called me and she's like, we need to do something. I said, I'm in, let's do this. But it was Missy right away that said, I'm thinking about microhubs, but it's got to be for the students who are most in need. And I think that we felt really strongly right from the outset, as Missy said, once you become official, it can be very difficult to move quickly. And we wanted above all else to have the mobility and the flexibility to help students and help families in the neighborhoods where they were needed most, and as quickly as possible. And that actually is sort of the, like, if you want to tag this by accomplishment, and this was done by the people who actually were running the NESTS, but we were able to sort of get the thinking together and the collaboration together to, by 6 weeks later, there were 4 NESTS up. And that's just not something that, I mean, the school district even said, we think, go with God. We're there for you, but you don't want to actually be part of us. And
they were very appreciative too of what we had been able to mobilize so quickly. But I think the piece of it that was really easy was that we were able to set up NESTS quickly through existing nonprofits, kind of like staying in their own lane a little bit. And so it was easy to do. But the thing that we couldn't accomplish, that the thing that we had trouble is that once you look outside of the nonprofits that had a bit more resources or were able to get funding for staffing or space or that sort of thing, we really couldn't identify any more than that, any more capacity than that outside of the realm of the nonprofits that were already in place and kind of doing that work too. So, but the nice thing was, like, we just left every meeting with like another intention or goal. And so that kind of kept the driving force going, so that we were able to have something in place when school started, which is still miraculous to me.
I'm in high barking mode. I'm so sorry. Can you briefly tell us what were those and where were those first 4 NESTs?
4 Cs had a NEST, and that was specifically for children living in shelter, elementary school students living in shelter. Dream City had a NEST, and they were, it was the 7th through 12th grade, and that was really to provide academic support, making sure they were logging on and things like that, and not messing around during asynchronous time. UAY opened a NEST, and that was mostly to cover that social emotional piece. And so that was they had drop-in hours at Mercer after school, and then, or like that 3 to 5 range. And then Open Heartland, they have one, they work with the Hispanic Latinx communities in certain mobile home parks. And so they set up theirs to address, I think, helping families get their students to school and helping with any translation barriers and things like that, as well as addressing that, the internet piece of that too. They kind of expanded theirs also, but I think that the family piece was a big portion of that was different than the other nests. Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County had a nest. They set that up before our conversations, but kind of dropped under the umbrella of Nest. Coralville had, through their Parks and Recs department, a huge before and after school online learning hybrid. Like they were kind of doing their own thing, but would come to the meetings and we kind of troubleshoot issues that came up during the school year for them that were similar across the board. But those 4 nests, I think, were like the initial ones we were able to pop up pretty quickly.
Right.
We did also partner with North Liberty, and it's kind of a story in its own right.
Yeah.
So it might end up being something that kind of is like, what did you learn? But I'll just put that on the radar for us to remember.
Yes, I don't mean
later.
to leave North Liberty or Hills.
Yeah, no, it's just because it wasn't initial. It was not.
Yeah.
So turning to you, Peggy. So you started in September, maybe late August? October. Okay, October. So I think this was kind of already going, and then it was kind of a sense of like how might there be somebody via the university that could assist with this. So in this role of program manager, can you provide a sense of how, from what Missie and Megan just sort of sketched out, how it's grown in terms of who is being served and what parts of the community are being served throughout and other ways that the program has expanded?
Okay. Yeah, so when I came on board, there were 12 nests set up, or the potential for 12. Some were still getting ready to move into space or waiting for things. And so we were working all these moving pieces. And as Megan mentioned, we started coordinating with other communities to try to help them onboard into the NEST project and grow. So when I hopped in on October, that is when we started working with North Liberty. And that was fun because I was looking over my notes today and trying to figure out how we can make this model work there. We were able to find the space. As Missie said, we just couldn't find ownership. We're lucky to build these wonderful connections, and Johnson County was able to jump in and help. So we were able to provide scholarships because our local before and after school programs were jumping in and offering full day childcare on hybrid days for school age kids to help keep them on task. But not everybody could afford $50 a day per child, or not everybody qualifies for childcare assistance. So the county was really quick, and we got to give them credit there, to pop up a scholarship program and start funding families underneath the 250% poverty line, which is very reasonable in COVID, very rough. And they were able to help a lot of families with that. And we've also started pivoting towards NEST 2.0, which is thinking how we can support and collaborate and help kids in other ways. I would say that we've built is really something.
If I can hop in for a second, I also want to say Peggy took basically like a ton of notes from Missie, me, and Jennifer Banta that were like either in emails or half done spreadsheets or whatever. And we sort of said, great, go make something of this. And she took this and like, here's what I'm seeing. And she organized everything. So I just want to like make that as public as possible, that we would not have been able to move as quickly as we could without Peggy actually putting all the pieces together, making order out of all these different ideas and saying, here's what you've got, here's the gaps. So it was more than project management, but it was also her being able to put all of these ideas into a semblance of order as well. I mean, she's been invaluable. So I just wanted to say, she's talking about, here's the other projects.
She was the fourth piece of the pie. I mean, it had the same passion and energy that we were feeling, but is maybe a bit more organized. Jennifer's really organized too, for the record, but I am not. And Megan has like this other really big job she's got to do. I at least could kind of carve, this is part of my job. anyway, we needed Peggy bad, but it was just nice because she was picking up everything that we were putting down and got what our mission and our goals were. And so she was the perfect fit for that role for sure.
Well, it was certainly something where there were all these great ideas and passionate people, and everybody had not only full-time jobs, but you know, we were in the middle of a crisis, and so everybody had personal things going on as well. So it was definitely it takes a village. There have been so many positive connections that have either come from this or been, you know, built, I think, made stronger through this. But it, you know, work like this is hard, this kind of collaborative grassroots work. So if you can talk a little about some of the challenges, maybe some of the frustrations you faced. I know, Missie, you actually spoke in one of our planning meetings about, you know, you're building something that you think it's what people want, and then they don't necessarily come. So maybe speaking to that and other challenges of the year.
I think that for me, this has been such a learning experience. And and that always happens, right? When you start a project and you think you're going to have this outcome and you actually end up with this outcome, and it's just completely different. And I think for me, it really exposed that, you know, the hierarchy of needs for each individual family is so different. And while school is an important part of my family's structure, that it's not that way for some people who are worried about how to get to work, where they're going to go to work, how they're going to feed their family. There are segments of our community that have bigger fish to fry than what grades their kids are going to get, or if they're even going to go to school. And we had all of the resources, we had funding, we were tackling the transportation issue, we had places for kids to go, and we had families identified, and they wouldn't make that step that they needed to make to get their kids into place, whatever. And I think that as a community, we need to recognize that it's not bad or good, it just is. And how as a society, we can address that. And that's really, in all of these conversations that we had, that's where I get stuck. Why is something more important? Like, you know, I mean, in identifying that's where I get stuck. But I think that we also really need to be mindful when we're building something like online school, we need to start from the bottom when we're building something. And so what will the least of us be, how will the least of us be affected when we're building what online learning looks like? And how can we as community leaders that are building things figure out what those needs of the least of us are? And I don't mean the least of us in that way, but, you know, I mean, those that don't have the same means, so that we can achieve equity in everything that we do. Just because you're poor doesn't mean that you have to make unsafe decisions. And I think that's what drives me now because of this. Just because somebody is poor it's unfair to me that they have to send their kids to school because they can't afford to send them somewhere else for online learning because of transportation, because of cost, because of things like that. And so I think that is one of the things that I saw, is that we don't have the answers, and how can we continue to find the answers so that we can impact change in a productive and positive way for everyone. And then I forgot, I think that was a two-part question, but that was one really big aha moment for me.
Well, and I think, Megan, you also talked about that as you got deeper into this year, that there were kind of the light was shown on different parts of the community, that even as somebody who's deeply involved in the community, you were surprised by. Mm-hmm. And kind of, it shifted some of your thinking about what is needed in supporting our kids.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes right in keeping, and Missie and Peggy and Jennifer Banta and I have had these conversations a lot about the way in which COVID has really exposed existing inequities and the degree to which, and I don't think it's just Iowa, I know it's not just Iowa City. I mean, it's nationally. The degree to which the school system is the safety net for so many things that have nothing to do with education. They do go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That has to do with food security. It has to do with childcare. It has to do with safety. It has to do with safe spaces. It has to do with actually, one of the things that we learned very, very quickly, that this is not a nice to have, it's a must have in this day and age, is broadband and internet connectivity. And that was a huge barrier. And the school district tried to solve for it, but that's not their job, right? I mean, they did the Chromebooks and they put Wi-Fi hotspots out there. But as Open Heartland can attest, broadband, you can't get the packages that are strong enough in certain parts of the city in order to be able to have a family, more than one person online without crashing it or freezing, as we all know, for Zoom freezing, right? So internet connectivity and broadband, that too, the school was taking care of that when everybody's there. But when they're not, this all of a sudden became a school problem, right? So that's one example of many, but this is the same thing with the to-go lunches and the drop-offs. Those were things that the school was taking care of. And in many cases, this was because there were no hot meals or no meals at all for some families. So those were the types of things that I was exposed to, and as well as a lot of my own blinders, honestly, because it was not my particular situation. And that was a very big moment of reckoning to say, isn't it something that I don't have to think about that? But the moment that that so-called safety net of school goes away, how many pieces of basic need is dropped away for so many people? And that's not a theoretical thing. That's a very real thing. And honestly, that's what those were the families and the kids that we were trying to reach through NESTS, was to be the support for those people who really needed it most, so that the school district doesn't have to take this all on, because they're trying to do school in the middle of a pandemic as well.
Yeah. And something that came up I know this came up in a few of my conversations with Peggy, and as well as I think when all of us spoke a week or so ago, was that in terms of those blinders, and that there were, I think, assumptions, presumptions about certain geographical parts of the city that would be hard hit. And then there were other parts of the city that there was almost a denial of, like, no, there will not be any problems in this particular area. And you all found that otherwise. Yeah.
Well, certainly and also it goes back to what Missie was saying about who needs it and versus who wants that support as well. And that has to do with sort of the dangers of assumptions. And it was something that we constantly were trying to monitor and say, let's not rest on our assumptions. Let's find out who needs what, and then try to be helpful. And in some cases, this is why in some, geographically for North Liberty, it ended up that childcare, because that was the sort of the fit that would work, because there weren't nonprofits there to partner with, but there were childcare centers that had slots. And so we could help match need in that way, so that there was childcare. But what we found here in Iowa City, in some pockets, particularly in the South District, was that a lot of families, they preferred to have their older kids stay at home so that they could actually watch after their littles, and it was their little siblings, because this is more part of the family unit, and it was a more safe and comfortable place for the family to be. Sort of self-contained in their own micro hub. Many families in the South District are immigrants and have lived through pandemics, and we're like, we're not going out. So again, these are things that we learned along the way, but it was about making sure that we kind of checked and rechecked and then tossed aside our assumptions to try and figure out how best to help. But yeah, I mean, there were a lot of surprises along the way and a lot to learn. In some cases, it was by sort of taking off some privilege. And in other cases, it was just simply looking from a different lens than our own.
Peggy,
and piggybacking off of that, I will say a lot of it was, we had quite a few meetings where it was, 10 people saying, and this, and this, and this. And then it was a lot of surveys trying to figure out where everybody kind of stood on the and this. Because at one point in time, we were working to get food delivery working. And then we're like, just logistically, we couldn't manage that. But we were able to figure out transportation for another family to get their kids to the program. So I think we really, like Megan said, tried to just review, and not be prescriptive.
Yeah, and I think also, like, just in the conversations, like when someone would say, oh, well, we can't, like, that wasn't good enough. Like, okay, what is the barrier and how can we, outside of the box, think about how to solve it? And I think that was also why we continue to keep rolling down the hill, because we find a barrier and then we figure out, I mean, like, and transportation is a huge thing, and it is an unnervingly huge thing. But I was like, there are vans sitting down there and we can do this. And there is a lot of governmental bureaucratic red tape around transportation. So, but
then we were ready. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because I mean, this is sort of transportation was perfect because we like kept going like full speed into a wall. It was first, okay, we're gonna use some county vehicles. Nope, all the bureaucracy. And so like, fine, we'll go to hotels. They're not doing valet stuff. Well, they've got vans. And it was like liability. So, but what ended up happening is like, okay, well, maybe we couldn't solve like the entire transportation problem, but to circle back to what Peggy said, we were able to find transportation for one family, right? And so maybe, we also learned to be good with small wins. We weren't helping in a systemic way, but we were helping a family that needed help and reached out, or who we found and heard about, said, oh, maybe we can do something.
And now we know to include the question in every application.
Yep, exactly.
And I love, small wins. It was a year of needing to really appreciate those small wins. So I wanted, Jason, if you're able to bring Elizabeth in now, that would be wonderful. So we were lucky enough to get one of the sites of a nest, and I never know whether they call it a site or just a nest. It's a thing. So Elizabeth Bernal Lopez is a cultural liaison for the school district. And she also works with Open Heartland, among other nonprofits in our community, including the Center for Worker Justice. And I had the pleasure of meeting Elizabeth last year when she was on another Obermann conversation regarding the effects of ICE raids on small communities. And so, Elizabeth, thank you so much for kind of popping in here. It would be wonderful to just kind of hear what was happening at Open Heartland this year more broadly, like as a result of COVID and what you all were experiencing with the kids and families you serve, and then how the NEST program kind of fit and or helped.
Well, thank you for having me too. Also, it's nice to see faces, and well, Open Heartland, it's I think has been really success because we see the needs of the families. We don't just have it like, okay, we are going to do this. No, we hearing people. If they asking, we hearing them, we need this. Okay, we try to figure out what is the problem and fix that at moment. And that helped a lot because when we're doing, well, Open Heartland, it's an organization that started from the bottom. We have a box padding 2 years ago that we started going every mobile home, bringing the children's museum, the library, and we also the food pantry mobile. So, and we're able to connect families with every resources that we have here. And so when the pandemic hits and when we found out that it's going to be a huge need for the, especially the Latino community, immigrant community, that's when we decide that what we need to do. And we move on to found a place first. Was a challenge because we didn't have any place in that time. So we contact with Parkview Church, the school here, and they have like space. We asking for a small space, and they give us the opportunity to use a huge space. For us was kind of like a really great place because we have the space, internet, and we able to put some desk, come in, like take care of the social distance, have masks, and have the capacity to have at least 25 or more people. That was the big challenge that was really nervous about it, but later we seen the place, takes like a week, 2 weeks to figure it out, clean, put everything together. So it was a little crazy, but it was work at the end. Like we served the first month or the first week, we have 25 kids at the nest. They show up, moms, and they are so nervous. They want to practice even the day before the school started. And we open Heartland one afternoon just to come, open your Chromebooks, make sure you have internet, put it the password, if you need the password, how you can control the internet, how you open your Chromebook. So the kids, they just kind of like, what we doing, what we doing? They are excited, but also they are nervous. But the parents, they are really scary about what's going to happen. I don't know, I'm able to do this. I'm not a teacher, I'm the parent. How I'm can able to help my kids? And we just bring it up. I'm like, okay, we can do wherever we can do here. We are here together. And the amazing thing that I see happen here in Open Heartland, it's a high schooler starting helping the little elementary school, like the kids that are not able even to open a Chromebook, how to use, go to the CISA. And they said, oh, I can explain you. So that was kind of like amazing having those kids here and explain to the little ones. That part, I just kind of like, I think nobody's can able to forget because the parents came and cried too, and we cried everyone here. So it was amazing. I really love that, how community live the community. So that part, it's incredible. And I really love because sometimes immigrants are really forgetting that we're here and nobody can hear you. You even can screaming and they didn't hear you. And this time the Open Heartland able to bring that voice, say, hey, we're here, and hey, we can hear you, you're here, and we're able to help you. So having this space is really, for the pandemic, for those people, they are coming and sometimes they say, hey, you bring me food when I need it. Here is what I can bring to you. So the best way to say thank you is bring you a piece of bread, food that they cook, and say, thank you so much for your help. And this is kind of like how, if you accept in that specific way that they giving thank you, that's really respect for them. So that's kind of we learn here that volunteers sometimes, oh no, I don't want it. And I explain how that it's can be a huge thing for them. They said, oh, okay, I can accept. And the volunteers, they accept what they say, thank you for why you're here to help in my kids. That's pretty great. Now they feel comfortable to reach out to the volunteers to ask questions. And they even ask, if I go to the conference or if I do in conference, what I can ask, because I don't know what it's kind of like, what is going to be my conference, because everything is online. So that one, it's pretty much like how impact is for the families, all those. For some people, it's very small, but for other people, it's a big change and big needed. Like pandemic just opened our eyes what a lot, not only Latino, but more communities from other countries also are really quiet and silent voice, that they need a lot of stuff, and some they have it and they don't look around of them that what you have is praise, is really priceless for like other people. It's just amazing that we work with the neighbor center, bring some kids here. So we still have kids that they are choosing to be online. And that's really great because the teacher even say, where you at? I'm in the place that my mom bring me here because I don't have the internet at house, so my hotspot is not working anymore. Or they use the hotspot for games, video games, and they don't know that they have to run out of data. And they say, well, it's not working. So that's kind of like the way that work Open Heartland. But as a culture liaison, helped me also a lot because I able to connect with the school, with the teacher. I can email the teacher and say, hey, she's gonna be late because we have technology issues. I can able to call the library and say, oh, this happened. Can you walk it through what I need to do? Yes, I can do that. Okay, we can figure it out. We fix one, the next one. And kind of like those days that it was more technology that I never imagined in my life I was going to help those people because I didn't have any idea about Chromebooks, internet, or connection, how you connect to the email, call the teacher, and everybody just like coming here. They are home sometimes and they just say, can I go? I have some technology problems. I don't know how to connect or talk to my teacher. So that was pretty amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know Peggy is working at Southeast Junior High right now in I don't know if it's sort of a practicum. I don't, what would be
my internship?
Your internship. I'm sorry. Thank you. So I think both Elizabeth and Peggy, as you're both kind of, you have a foot in both worlds right now. Like you're working with the NESTS, you're working in the schools. What are you seeing as both the needs and your best wishes for how the community and the schools can work together even better?
I would say at the beginning of this, when we all met, that, you know, I'm working in a school, Elizabeth works in a school, Missie and Megan got it together. We're going to be able to do something crazy, awesome. And even as I've sat in some of these NEST meetings, I'm like, dang, we're going to be able to do something really crazy, awesome. Like we could do something. But it's those little ticks in the connections. It's the ticks and the connections between the people in the administration and the Spanish speaking families who are nervous about internet and don't understand this Chromebook thing, which even to me as a parent, I'm freaked out by the Chromebook thing. And I've owned 3 myself with my child and my son getting an iPad. Like, what? He doesn't need an iPad from the school district. But as I meet people and I interact with people, I think, God, we could really all just figure this out if we just had a solid connection plan, a pathway to everyone. So for instance, today I was finally able to host my first online Zoom social with some online junior high kids. And I started with pets and we called it Pet Talk. I only had about 10 of 418 kids I invited show up, which is actually pretty decent. But some of them were quite bummed that we were ending the conversation after about 75 minutes. I was like, you guys, I really do have to go. I have a meeting. They're like, well, when are we going to meet again? And I said, we're going to meet next week. And then I got an email from a student who wasn't even there asking who I was. And I realized now that I have a connection with these kids, I get to use my platform and my voice to invite them to all these amazing NEST things I only know about because I'm a NEST. And I wouldn't know otherwise. So I think about it like that. I think I told you guys that it's like a scatter plot when it should be a solar system. But I realized the kids are like the scatter plot and we need to create a better solar system.
That's a nice metaphor. Elizabeth, do you have other thoughts on how the schools and the community could work together to support kids better than we are right now?
Well, it being a challenge, but working with the school, I work a lot and I learn a lot also too, like a lot. And I work with right now, like West High being like my strongest connection. And because they kind of listen what the community say. It's not about what I say. If I asking what is needed, and I kind of like the face and the voice, the people, they said, we need this. And I can talk with somebody and able to understand the community. That be something, no, be like, oh yeah, we're hearing you. Okay, sounds good. No, just have the communication open and welcoming any culture, any people that they really asking for some help. And because it's really important to be like having that connection, because the school for Latino, Spanish, like community, it's a very, the school is the second home, and the teachers are the second parents. So they are really respect to those people. And if you don't listen to them, you lose that respect. They're kind of like, okay, they don't care about me, why I have to care about school? So that's the way that they see. And some people, they don't understand. I think just be open and listen. And if you want to act, just do action, and they can see, are you doing this for me? Thank you so much. And I can bring more people, and I can do this, and they can be really strong all together inside of the school district.
I want to move to a question that we got via email through the library, and I know I sent this to Missie and Megan and Peggy, so it's a long one, but let me read it. I'm hoping you'll address how ideas or practices from this program or learned in the process of creating the program might serve students after the pandemic, which is sort of my final question, is where is NESTS going next? So we'll get to that, but especially those who are not particularly safe in status quo school environments. For example, students who belong to groups that are targeted by school prison nexus policies, including BIPOC students, students with disabilities, youth living in foster care, LGBTQ youth, and youth living in poverty, as well as students who do not thrive in large classroom settings because of mental health conditions or development disability conditions, including sensory issues that are common among those on the autism spectrum. How might this small setting supplement or even supplant learning environments that do not work for all children, both in terms of their academic and social needs? And then secondly, how might what has been learned here inform changes in the general school environment after the pandemic? Great questions, not easy ones. Anybody?
I was actually jotting down and sort of spinning out some ideas based on the conversations that we've had, and in rereading the question that you just read. And I think Missie and I actually were texting before this, and she was noting that her daughter is in quarantine right now for, exposure. And on the one hand, the immediate reaction is, oh boy, that sucks. And then you stop and you pause. And she responded, this sucks for her. She's, having a horrible time. And that's writ large for everybody. What has happened through having to come back to school and all of this is that a lot of trauma has been normalized. And so I think that moving forward, the model that we might be able to provide, and I'm really, really struck by what you were talking about, Elizabeth, about listening and adapting to what the students needed. And I think that I don't know what specific forms those will take, but I think that moving forward, I know Missie and I and Jennifer and Peggy are committed in our own ways, whether it's as one formal group or whatever it might be, but to meet students where they are, recognizing that just because there's going to be vaccines in arms, there's a lot that's going to have to happen for the students to feel okay. As adults, we're undergoing this. Imagine what it's like for kids of all ages. They're super adaptable, but the flip side is that this is not normal. And so I think that there needs to be an awful lot of listening to kids, providing almost like the shell of a structure whether it's a place or let's talk about pets or what have you, but it's about trust building so that they can feel comfortable again. And so I do think that these kind of smaller pods, maybe these aren't going to be nests per se. Maybe they will be, but I think that there is something really vital and important about having safe spaces, however those learners, those students, those kids are going to define it and what they want from it. But I think to offer it not in, again, this top-down community school district manner, I don't think that that's going to be as successful, especially in the beginning. I think it has to be homegrown and from the bottom up, and what do the students need, and let's provide some space for them.
Have you, Megan, just to interject, have you seen, experienced interest from the district in the NEST model as something it might continue in some other way, or in the smaller, these smaller segments, particularly for some of the issues that this question addresses?
We have not discussed that with them, but I think we have no fear knocking on their door and saying, hi, we have another idea, and talking to them. I think that the hurdle there is probably the fact that it's a very large structure. And we have been told many times about how slowly it functions and how slow it is to stand something up. And while that is true, I think we've also been encouraging them to see how there can be a lot of innovation within the system. And so we don't have to think about it as that the Titanic needs to turn on a dime. It's more like, what can we do in this little room, right? So these are conversations I think that we'll continue to have and to offer up. And I think that there is definitely open ears for it. I think it's just getting to that yes, because logistically, I'm not sure that the district can quite visualize that yet, but that's fair enough. We haven't exactly visualized what that would look like either.
But I think too, we really need to be mindful, again, going back to what the school district did before COVID that we didn't know about.
Yeah.
Is this really one more thing that they can take on? There's already staff and teacher burnout that we've talked about extensively. So what can we as a community do to build these students up and to give them those spaces where they do feel comfortable and things like that? Again, I don't think that we can lob this back to the school district and be like, we found a great model. We think it may be even more successful if you do it this way. Again, that was the Titanic turning example is perfect. The school district can't pivot that way, that quickly, we know. But as a community, as community leaders, as nonprofit leaders, we can pick up that slack and we need to. So, and I think that, that is not another school district issue to address, but one that someone has identified or helped us identify, how can we move that needle forward so that those students are supported in a different way.
I was raising my hand so I could say, see, this is why I love Missie Forbes so much.
And to piggyback off of that, I think down the line, it looks like a community school district shared vision for what we want for our youth. It's our nonprofits, our school district, everybody coming to the table and figuring out what we want kids to come out of Iowa City, Johnson County, our community to be prepared for. Some of the other amazing effects I've seen from NEST are kids at Southeast participating in things because they heard about them from other kids who'd been to a NEST. And they're getting connected with other things and getting new interests. So I think it all kind of has to come together.
And Peggy, before we go into the final question about the future, I know you had done some research on programs similar to, broadly similar to this in other parts of the country. And is there either a program or maybe a few key pieces from various programs that really excite you that you think we might learn from?
So there's one real model that I'm super excited about, and then there's a future model happening here in Iowa. So I'll start with the real model. It's called Alignment. I happened to see a sign when I was in Peoria about a month ago, and I emailed everybody on the NEST team. I was like, you gotta see this. and it said align Peoria. So their community, their civics, their school district, everybody came in and they've set a mission statement for the community and what that looks like in different parts of the community. Our banks are going to help by making sure they're financing BIPOC people, reaching out to other communities, sponsoring less traditional festivities. Our representatives are going to fight for more funding, road projects. They just got a $203 million grant to improve some roads around there. But this is borrowed from a model in Nashville of people who were much like us nesters, who were just chasing their tails. And somebody in the meeting said, I had to go to a meeting minutes to get the notes and figure out how this whole thing worked, by the way, that, paying for anything. And they said, it's like, we were going into the schools and helping, and it was helpful, but it was also burdensome for the schools to try to connect it themselves. So in Nashville, using this program, they were able to reduce gang involvement and violence in the community and started having the highest graduation rates. And so they set this like 5-piece thing that is an overall board of directors, and then another board comprised of people who are out in the field, and then some others. But the other thing that's really exciting is Des Moines, the superintendent there and the Des Moines Public School District applied for Gear Up Iowa, and they got a big grant. And Gear Up is about helping all of our students find their post-secondary school plan, whether it be apprenticing, whether it be junior college, whatever. And they are increasing their school counseling and student family advocate staff. So by this academic school year, their school counseling ratio will be 300 to 1. The national average is about 460, and they're hoping to be to 250, which is the recommended thing by 2025. They're also hoping to have all of their schools RAMP certified by 2025 and some other things, so many acronyms. But what I find most impressive about it is their plan to implement. They're spending this first year just getting staff on board, identifying what resources are available in the community before anybody builds something new, and then seeing how they can kind of piece it all together before they start teaching the kids. And focusing on trauma-informed care and positive behavior interventions and things that do more good.
Yeah, and as one of you said, I mean, the kids have had so much trauma through this year, and what they're going to be bringing back with them in the coming years will be, we don't even quite understand that yet. So we have just a little bit of time. I'd like to open it if people have questions they want to put in the Q&A. And as those are coming in, as Jason opens that, if Missy and Megan, if you have any thoughts on, kind of the next iteration or what you're thinking with NEST for next year.
Well, definitely keeping the conversation open. We all are toe the party line that the way things were pre-pandemic, we can't go back to that. It's not okay. It's about equity and it's about access. So right now I'm kind of like making the rounds with people who are running summer camp, summer programming, and just saying, can you just, because programs are limited anyway, can you just reserve 1 or 2 spots for some kids that are maybe identified as at risk or low income that we could plug in there, because not everybody has the ability to sit in front of a computer the minute a camp opens and log on. And so we're getting a little bit of traction in that regard. And I think there's going to be a loud thunderbolt. But we're getting a little bit of traction in that regard, which is really exciting. We do have funding for scholarships. We're still kind of in the planning stages of what that looks like, who we vet, how that all rolls out. But contact whoever's contact information you have to get a hold of that information, because we do have funding for those types of things. We're really fluid with what we can do, what we can fund, who we can fund, where you can go, I mean, that's so, we have a lot of leeway with the funding that we have for for those students that need that help. But again, it's about pushing the envelope to equity and access moving forward, and how do we have those conversations? Who do we have those conversations with, and things like that. So that will be, we've had to pivot so many times this year with what our NEST intention has become, that we want to continue that conversation. We've got a lot of work to do. And I think when you look at junior high students and high school students, and you know, students of other backgrounds and things like that, we've let a lot of kids down this year. And we need to move quickly, and we need to quit, because they're a generation that's going to look, that is disappointed and may throw in the towel. And we as grown-ups feel that way sometimes. How do you process that, you know, as a 15-year-old, 14-year-old or whatever? So I think those are the things too, moving quickly. Like we don't have to have 14 meetings to get to an end result. We really don't.
And we can't.
And we can't.
That's, you know, again, we're pivoting a lot, but I think that one of the things that has come out as the school year has progressed is that we started off saying, how do we create a safe space for COVID for learners and to give them internet access? And it's quickly come also, the real benefits were about being able to be around and to socialize. And so I think that too, I mean, the focus now on, like, we're able to help kids get some scholarships into camp so that they can have some interactions and some fun and some activities. I think ways to think about, and again, it's going to come from the students, I think, but how to help them socially and emotionally as you kind of emerge. There's already conversations from adults saying, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to come out. And it's a real, it can be both facetious, but it's very real. How are we going to start acting with each other once it's normal again, right? Well, we don't know. Neither do the kids. And I think that that is a focus that we're going to be looking at as well. Is like, how can we help ease that? How can we help create a space for that?
So there's a question in the chat about an interest in teachers, tutors during the summer. And then I think if you could also respond to a larger question about how to support NESTS.
Volunteer. I think that in any capacity that you can, there are organizations out there that have mentorship programs. These students need mentors. And I think that was the most disappointing thing as a local, born and raised Iowa Cityan. I can lecture this community as your sister. You know, Iowa City is an amazing community, but there's a lot of lip service. Like, we need to put our money where our mouths are. If this community is important to you, and if these students are important to you, volunteer, because that is one way to show and make an impact. That is one way to show you care, and another way to make a big impact fast. And I think social emotionally, that is the only way to help students in this community.
Is NEST in particular wanting volunteers? And if so, if you could maybe, I don't know if you have access to the Q&A, if you can type in.
Peggy, I'm going to let you cover that.
Okay.
It's not necessary. So
I'm going to get the website loaded. We've been doing these strategic doing meetings where we're trying to get things done as a big group. And they've come up with one place for people to figure out where to volunteer. I'm going to put that link in the chat.
Great, thank you. And Missie, I understand that you meant volunteer broadly with kids, but but I imagine there are people who want to know specifically.
Sure. So what we have become sort of as a clearinghouse, and so the link that Peggy's going to put in the chat, we're going to be kind of the clearinghouse to triage volunteers to different organizations that have volunteer opportunities and mentorship opportunities already. So, but if one of those opportunities doesn't float your boat, definitely ask us how else you can volunteer. And you know, we're kind of like the conduit between who wants to volunteer and those opportunities right now. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and I can give an example. I have a friend who's 1 year out of being a retired teacher, a high school teacher, and he volunteered at the at Dream City this year with the NEST high school students. And you know, helping kids make sure they were doing their homework, that they were on track, and, you know, just being there on a regular basis. So yeah, there's I'm sure many possibilities. And as a native Iowa Cityan, I agree with you. All right, we are at the end of our time, and we can probably all now go run around and close our windows and all that. Thank you so much, all four of you, for being here tonight, for sharing what you're doing, and for sharing your time so graciously with the students and families of our community. Really a very, very heartfelt thank you for everything. All right, we will be back with Obermann Conversations in the fall. That's a weird thing to say. All right, good night.